This is Bishop Michael Burbidge, and you are listening to the Walk Humbly podcast.
Welcome to the Walk Humbly podcast. I'm Billy Atwell, Chief Communications Officer for the Diocese and your co-host. We want to start this podcast off by thanking all those who have given to the Bishop's Lenten Appeal, because your generosity has made so many ministries at the Chancery here and throughout the diocese possible. Obviously, our vocations office, a lot of our education ministry, youth ministry, young adult, Hispanic ministry, multicultural. But one of them is the communications office, and the studio that we're recording in is made possible because of the BLA. So thank you to those who have given to it. If you haven't already, please rate this podcast or write a review if you can on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you're listening. And if you're on YouTube, please subscribe and ring the bell. Sign up for our e-newsletter at arlingtondiocese.org. And, just over 23,000 people follow Bishop Burbidge on Twitter. And on Twitter every day, he offers a short gospel reflection for that day. You can follow the diocese on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're always posting great content there. If you have a question for Bishop Burbidge, send it to info@arlingtondiocese.org, or you can call or text us at 703-831-7013. We've got some great topics today. We're going to talk about some controversial statements made about the Rosary from the publication The Atlantic. We're at the one-year anniversary of the crisis in Afghanistan, and we're going to talk about Bishop Burbidge's 20th anniversary ordained to be a bishop. So I welcome your host now, Bishop Burbidge. Bishop, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Billy. Thank you. I hope all of our listeners are doing well. I know summer is nearing an end here, and hope it's been a time of refreshment and renewal for our listeners, because we know that's what gives us the strength for the doing that God is asking of us at this time in our lives. So it's great to be back at our podcast studio here.
Absolutely. Bishop, recently the Atlantic magazine published an article that connected the Rosary to some fringe political elements and said that the Rosary has become essentially a symbol of these political messages. It caused a lot of outrage amongst Catholics. We saw it on social media. It was kind of spreading like wildfire, and they felt that it really belittled this fundamental Catholic devotion. I think you probably at least saw the article or heard about it. What was your reaction?
No, I share the outrage. I really think that article was very unsettling to me. When our most beautiful and critical symbols of faith cannot be maligned. I mean, really, that article maligned the Rosary and those who prayed it. And actually, praying the Rosary by good and holy, faithful people are part of the solution to our problems today in society. And so I think the author really reversed things around, and to begin to take such a beautiful tradition, a beautiful symbol, a beautiful prayer, and to connect it to extremism and radicalism and all those kind of things is just so insensitive and very hurtful. And so, just a good opportunity, I think, for all of us to be drawn closer to our Blessed Mother through the praying of the Rosary. I always like one of St. John Paul II apostolic letters, where he calls the Rosary a prayer of great significance, destined to bring forth a harvest of holiness. I love those words. And that's what the Rosary is all about. This is what our author here failed to realize. It's about guiding each of us and our world to God. And that's why we're seeing so many problems in our midst, I believe. Absolutely. It's because we lost that sense of God. And in the Rosary, John Paul II teaches us that we are helped on that path to God, to contemplate her Son through the Rosary. So that's just the opposite of being what the author says an extremist. It's rather becoming what this world truly needs, and that is a peacemaker. And we long for that gift, and it's only found in Christ, the Son of God, the Son of Mary. So, dear friends, keep praying the Rosary for our world, our nation, and for your special intentions, especially your own sanctification.
Absolutely. Something a lot of people were praying for. We just passed the 1-year anniversary. It was August 15th of last year, believe it or not, that the government of Afghanistan was taken over by the Taliban and forcing tens of thousands of refugees from their homeland into countries around the world. We saw the images of people chasing, American planes, hoping to get a seat. Many of the displaced Afghan families, especially those who worked with American forces, in their home country as translators and in different roles. They came to the United States, and more than 1,300 of them found a home here in the Diocese of Arlington, where Catholic Charities here assisted them in that transition. As we stand here now a year out and having supported so many of those desperate families, what comes to mind for you at this 1 year marker?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the images that we all saw about a year ago, and how devastating that was to see. But the reality is still in great need of our prayer over this situation, and so I hope that the shock of what we saw and the reality in the lives of so many of our brothers and sisters as part of God's holy family, that shock in a sense doesn't wear off, because our response is still needed in prayer and in action. And as you mentioned, our Catholic Charities, I am so extremely proud of the team, of the staff of Catholic Charities, especially those involved in the resettlement program. We are preparing, as you know, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of our diocese in 2024. But it's important to remember, as we study our history as a diocese, that from the very beginning, the Catholic Diocese of Arlington was known for its ministry, its work of resettling refugees and helping them and migrants. And so, Billy, you're right. That's a startling number. 1,300 Afghans, men, women, children, since last August have been helped to be resettled through the work of Diocesan Catholic Charities dedicated team. And especially, as you mentioned earlier in introducing our podcast, this is only possible through the generosity of all you who are listening, and the faithful throughout our diocese. It's your generosity that allows Catholic Charities and our diocese to be part of such ministry. So you are really part of it, dear friends. If you support the BOA and support our Catholic Charities, you're part of helping to settle our migrants and refugees. And that means, it really means meeting them at the airport. It starts right there, and it continues. It's an accompaniment, and finding housing and jobs and all those kind of things. And I've been to some of our places where our team work, the offices, and I hear their passion for doing this work, but also of what it involves. And I'm just so inspired. A few weeks ago, Migration and Refugee Services held its annual backpack distribution.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Which is great, right? Because the kids they all want their backpack. It's at its Arlington, Manassas, and Woodbridge and Fredericksburg offices. MRS gave away over 400 backpacks loaded with folders, markers, pencil boxes, and more. Many of which came from our parishes who help to collect these items that go into the backpack. But I'm sure our parents out there know when you get a backpack and you fill it with all these tools, that is a pretty expensive initiative there. And so we were so happy to be part of that. And I really like it. It just shows what our Catholic Charities is always about, is the respect and the dignity that is owed to every person as a child of God. It sounds like a simple thing, but I don't think it is. I watched the faces of the children receiving them. But the backpacks are not just like in some sort of corner, and the student, a young child or parents come in and say, "Oh, go get a backpack." They're marked. They're age appropriate, so an 8th grade boy is not getting like something with, something from Frozen on it, like they're going to get something age appropriate.
Right.
And that just, again, this is just a sign of respect that we owe to one another. So
now I know in the past you've been there for some of the distributions and handled those backpacks. I don't know who has more fun though, them or you. We have pictures that you really enjoyed getting to see the kids.
I just see their faces. It's so wonderful. Yeah.
So for those listening, this obviously marks the 1 year anniversary, but we've got coming up, National Migration Week is something that we recognize each year. That's September 20th through 25th. And on the 25th, that's actually the World Day of Migrants and Refugees that the Pope Francis has called for. And if you go to ccda.net/National Migration Week, so it's Catholic Charities Diocese of Arlington, ccda.net/ National Migration Week. There is something cool going on every day. There's all kinds of classes, including like cooking classes, but educational classes and seminars and stuff related to migration issues. It's really going to be a very full week. So if you would just go to ccda.net/National Migration Week, you can learn a lot more about what they have going on there. But that's been, I know Stephen Caratini, the president and CEO of Catholic Charities, at one point I remember talking with him. They'd already taken on like 700 or 800 refugees, and they had agreed to take on several hundred more. And I said, so how are you going to do it? He said, well, we're going to figure it out. And that's very Stephen's approach. You know, he knows that they've got the tools. It's just a matter of the logistics, and the team put it together. And here we are at 1,300 people.
It's incredible.
Really
and God's
impressive.
goodness and God's grace in helping us to do so. Incredible.
Absolutely. So most people probably aren't aware of this until I mentioned it on the front end of this podcast, but September 5th will be your 20th anniversary as a bishop. That's a pretty big one. So I was hoping to ask you a few questions about that, if you don't mind.
Sure, no, it'd be fun. 20 years ago, when I went in as a bishop into the first meeting of the Conference of Bishops, I was like, I think the second youngest in the room. Billy, that's not the case now.
If you wait long enough, right? How would you describe the overall experience? Obviously, it's very different being a priest than a bishop. You're taking on different responsibilities, a different life.
Yeah, well, overall experience, it's really one of shock. You know, I often explain to the students when I visit the schools, they often ask, so how'd you know you wanted to become a bishop?
Right.
Well, I never really wanted to be a bishop. Most people who go, when we go into seminary, you have your heart is that of a pastor. You see, especially a diocesan priest, you see yourself always as serving as a priest, and maybe God willing one day as a pastor in your home diocese. And you know, and in the Catholic Church, you know, unlike other Christian denominations, you don't ask to be a bishop. You don't volunteer to be a bishop. You don't interview to be a bishop. There's a very, very thorough process in screening and vetting and things like that. I don't know how I got through it, but it involves lay people's, recommendations and commentaries, priests, other priests, religious, whatever. But you never know you're even being considered. There's no like, are you interested, or would you allow your name to go forward? You're never asked that question. So when you're told this process has already happened, and when you're told the Pope has already signed off on it, and so you can only really say no if, God forbid, there's serious medical issues or
something they couldn't have known.
That they didn't know, right? Or a potential scandal, God forbid, or something like that. But they could not have known. You'd be obligated to share that with them. But if you say, well, you know, I'm really comfortable where I am, that's not a reason to say no.
It's not the life you've been chosen
for. So you
for.
just trust that God's Holy Spirit, as He promised, is at work, and for some, mysterious reason, you've been asked to serve in this capacity.
It's got to be surreal knowing that this whole process has happened. So you get this call, I remember you describing in the past as a pretty short call. Yeah. And you find out that weeks of work, probably more than that, maybe months has taken place.
Yeah.
Is that a surreal feeling?
It is surreal. It is. It really is. And but again, either you believe the Holy Spirit's at work or you don't.
Yeah. So you've been called multiple times now, obviously, to be told you're the Bishop of Arlington, or before that, Raleigh. Who called you, though, to let you know that you would be on auxiliary bishop in Philadelphia?
Yeah, it's really strange, because usually it's the apostolic nuncio, the Pope's representative, who calls you. But I don't know why, but it was the Cardinal Archbishop, of Philadelphia, who called me directly. And I'll never forget it. I was actually, I think I've told this story before, but I was actually on vacation with my family.
Oh, interesting.
And it was my turn that morning to go get the donuts, and coffee. So I go and get them, and I'm thinking of this, big house back at the where we were all staying, which was great and fun to be with family and all, but it was probably about like 15 minutes of quiet time I had in the car. I'm saying, I think I'm gonna have this coffee by myself.
Yeah.
It's like 8 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden, I see it's the Archbishop calling me, and I'm like, what is he calling? 8015, and he told me, he identified himself. He said, listen, I'm so sorry, I have to convey this message to you by phone, but I'm on my way. I'm boarding a flight, and you need to know this now. I'm like, oh, so your heart starts pounding.
Yeah. Oh no.
And he says, the Holy Father, Pope John Paul II, has named you auxiliary bishop of Philadelphia. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And he says, you have to write a letter. And he starts giving me these instructions about writing it down in the donut bag. You know? And I'm like, oh my goodness. And like again, he said, okay, I got to run. So the phone call was like 2 minutes. And
so funny.
I went back to the house and they're like, everything okay? And I'm like, yeah, things great. Anything new? No, nothing's there, because you're not allowed to say anything until the public announcement. So it was crazy. And ironically, what's really funny is the parking lot where I got the call was, we were at the Outer Banks, so it was the Diocese of Raleigh.
Oh, that's so
where
funny.
I eventually would become the bishop of. And when I would go visit the parish near that, I'm like, always think of that parking spot.
Yeah, that's so fun. Oh, wow, yeah.
That's funny. Yeah.
So early on in your Episcopal life, as we call it, was there a bishop that you really wanted to emulate, or someone that you looked to and said, if I'm made an ordinary of a diocese, that's the kind of life and model I would want to offer?
I would say no, Billy, because I was never even thinking of that. I mean, I always admired and respected the bishops, who came into my life. Mm-hmm. But I never thought of, boy, I should be learning from them in case this happens. I really never thought of that. But there were many wonderful priests in my life and pastors. And that's what a bishop is, a pastor. So certainly those qualities that I saw people very close to me. I wasn't really close to any bishops, but from a distance, I admire them and respected them. But at that point, now since then, you turn to people who are you become your mentors and things. Yeah.
Now, you chose for your Episcopal motto, so every bishop chooses a motto that's supposed to symbolize their ministry. Describe the one that you chose and why you chose that.
Well, it comes from the prophet Micah, where the prophet Micah says, what God is asking of you, to do what is right, to love goodness, to act with justice, and to walk humbly with your God. So I chose that phrase, to walk humbly with your God, knowing that my family and my priest friends would help me to live it, because they keep me very humble.
Well, when you're writing down the instructions on a donut bag for your new bishop's ministry, that's pretty humbling, I'm sure. Yeah.
And it's amazing because they tell you have to pick a motto. I was like, what? And but actually, that was the verse that I used for the back of my holy card when I became a priest.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you already had it in mind.
So that was, I felt, I picked it when I was ordained a priest. Yeah. So why would that not apply? And it's a beautiful motto, that humility, that beautiful virtue of, certainly it includes acknowledging our unworthiness and our limitations and our weakness. Humility helps us to do that. But it's much more than that. It's an awareness of, that without God, I can do nothing. Yeah. So it leads you to that total reliance. So whatever our vocation in life is, we should pray for that virtue, which I do every day, of a humility that allows us to know that I am completely, totally, radically dependent on the Lord and His grace. Sometimes too, I also emphasize to myself the word to walk. Sometimes I don't walk. I maybe am just in too much of a what's next. But humility allows you to walk with God, day by day. And this is a journey, and just to walk and appreciate the blessings and the gifts all around you, and never to lose that. So I not only pray every day for the gift to be humble, but also to walk.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. So you were ordained initially as an auxiliary bishop. That's different than being what we would call an ordinary, which in English is not the right word, right? It's like it maybe misrepresents if you don't understand what it means. So describe what an auxiliary bishop is, and then what were your responsibilities in Philadelphia? Sure.
So an auxiliary bishop is, an assistant to the archbishop or the bishop of the diocese, because of the size of the diocese usually, and the amount of people that a bishop needs helpers, and so that's what an auxiliary bishop is. And so Yeah, I always say it's an auxiliary bishop is like being an uncle, because you can be the nice guy. you're not making the final decision. That's where I remember my nieces and nephews when they're growing up. I'm always the guy saying yes, right? Because I don't have to say no.
You're not the disciplinarian.
So as an auxiliary bishop's that way too. It's like you're the helper, you're loyal, you're faithful to the archbishop. You're his representative, so you're always faithful to him and what he's asking of you. But ultimately, it's his decision, so that it's not falling on your desk. So that takes a lot of pressure. And so when I became Bishop of Raleigh, that all changed. Now you're not just the auxiliary. You're in a sense what you said. You're in charge now.
Was that a hard adjustment?
It was a huge adjustment. It really was. It was a very, very difficult adjustment because not only did my life change because I became, entrusted with the decisions and with the care of the priests and seminarians and the parishes, but I also was now in unfamiliar territory. When I became an auxiliary, my life, in a sense, did not change drastically because I was home.
Right.
I knew all the priests, I knew all the seminarians, I knew all the ins and outs, and I didn't have to pack up and move. And so when I went to Raleigh, it was 4 years later after I became a bishop, so I was 49. So I always said I was a good Irish Philadelphia. I left home at 49.
Finally found your way out of the nest. Yeah.
So, and then I had 10 wonderful years as the Bishop of Raleigh.
So what was your fondest memory from Raleigh? Because a lot happened in 10 years.
Yeah, a lot happened.
It's a growing diocese, but you
It's
accomplished a lot.
a great diocese. And after my first year, I really began to adjust to a different culture. And it really is a different culture. It's a slower pace. Not that it's not Raleigh, was and is now, especially a very vibrant and growing diocese, very much like our own. But the culture itself in the state, is a little bit more relaxed than, not as aggressive, maybe I say, as Philadelphia. And I really, that Southern hospitality is, I came to learn, was not a cliche. It was for real. I was like, people don't beep their horns here, People actually say hello to you when they're walking. I love Philadelphia. I mean, Philadelphia is my heart's there, and I love going back there.
Right.
But that was a kind of welcome change. And I really saw, like in Philadelphia, the church is, I experienced at, a great part of the Catholic Church, the institutional church, the schools and the hospitals and the nursing homes and the universities, everything was Catholic. In Raleigh, not so much so because, the Catholics are not the big population. But what I did experience was another beautiful aspect of the Catholic Church, that of community. Because in Raleigh, many people's families, like mine, were not with us. And so the church and the parish and all became your home. And so that was a really beautiful aspect. And I really did, my piece of my heart, which every priest should say when he leaves an assignment. And I'm able to say sincerely, piece of my heart is still in Philadelphia. Piece of my heart is still in Raleigh, will always be. But now this is home. And I thank God every day for the great privilege of serving in the Diocese of Arlington. So when you came to Arlington, and you've been here, for 5-6 years now? 6 in December. 6. What are some things that stick out to you in that time? Yeah, well, it was a little bit different than Raleigh because I knew Arlington. So from my days as a seminarian, Arlington always had the tradition of sending a good number of their seminarians to the same seminary I went to and the same seminary I was rector at, St. Charles in Philadelphia. So there were many, many occasions where I was down either as a seminarian or as the rector of the seminary, for the ordinations of these men about to be ordained. And I went to their first masses and the churches. So I really had a familiarity with the diocese. So it wasn't as much of a shock, right? And this wasn't now my first time away from home. I'd been away from home. And I also knew, that the wonderful, tremendous reputation of Bishop Laverty, who I consider a dear friend, and, even before my arrival here, and I would like to think that friendship has grown even deeper. And I'm so grateful to him for handing over to me a diocese that was in such great shape, great stability. So I knew that walking into the diocese. I knew many of the priests I to this day, I just cannot say enough about the wonderful priests of our diocese and the support that they give to me. And then, of course, you learn more and more about all the tremendous work going on here.
Yeah.
And so it's a great experience. And it's an exciting time in our diocese. We got a lot of work to do. I pray God that He gives me the health and zeal to continue serving with all of you, my brother priests and consecrate religious, deacons, seminarians, and lay faithful.
I want to ask, when you're named a bishop, there's a press conference, there's kind of that initial announcement, but I know you were very thoughtful about your first visits and the places you were going to go. Again, you were familiar with the diocese, so it wasn't a new place to you, but talk about some of those first places that you visited, the people that you
yeah, that's a good question, Billy. Thank you. And it was deliberate. When you come in for the press conference, excuse me, you spend like a day and a half in the diocese before you go back to your own diocese at that time. And so I wanted the visits that I made that day to kind of be a signal of what would be my priorities coming into the diocese. And so I visited the villa where a number of our retired priests are, because the care of the priests is very important to me, and it must be in the life of any bishop. I went to a Catholic school. I remember visiting St. James and Bishop O'Connell that day, because Catholic education is very dear to my heart. I went to Catholic Charities and to Christ's House because serving the poor and the needy is also at the heart of what I would hope to be my ministry as the bishop of the diocese. And so, and then I celebrate Mass at the cathedral, which is the home for the bishop. So they were kind of like you couldn't do everything in a day and a half. I mean, there were many other priorities, but they were, the initial visits I made. Yeah.
And there's been such growth in the 6 years you've been here. There's been a lot of growth, prior to your time here. It's been a growing diocese for quite a while, but you've founded new parishes, renovated parishes and sanctuaries, and, the need for growth, the need to accommodate, this growth, especially within our schools that we've seen. In the last 2 years, we've had a 9% increase in enrollment. How proud are you of all of these?
Well, it's the abundance of God's goodness and grace to this diocese we should be thanking the Lord every day for, and I do every day, because it's not the reality throughout the country. And it's not anyone's fault. It's that there's always a shift in population, and we're fortunate enough to be the recipients of where people want to be, and where there's a strong Catholic tradition. And so thus we're experiencing this growth. And so we have to work hard to manage it and to provide the resources that we need, the priests that we need. And so with it comes a great responsibility. But again, we're in this together. And I hope I hope I'm not spending too much time on this segment, because I never want to bore people with my story. But I would like maybe just to say that even just listening to my responses to some of your questions, Billy, that I would hope that all of our listeners maybe could reflect on their own vocations, and like I did. Like I'm doing, because anniversaries are, especially like a significant one, they are time for recollection. But I hope what we all can see is that God from the very beginning has a plan for us. He knows us. He's the one who created us. He has a divine and mysterious plan for each one of us. And when you look at your life, it's like, wow, I never expected this, but God prepared me for that, because what He had me do previously or whatever. And through it all, the Lord who calls us promises to be with us. And again, I honestly admit it that there were some challenges and transitions and taking on new responsibility. But God, as I look back, God never left me, and I just think that's so important for us to remember. And so, in a sense, what the Lord always taught us, and it's true, our Blessed Mother is a great example of it. It's saying yes to God's holy will, even when it's divine, when mysterious. It's that yes with trust and humility that leads us to our freedom and to our peace and to the joy that we're seeking. So I pray and ask maybe all our listeners consider, just pray every day for that grace to trust and to surrender and to say yes to what God is asking.
Bishop, I really appreciate you helping us learn a little bit more about you and reflect back on those 20 years. But here we are at the end of the podcast. Would you send us off with your blessing?
And just one thing, just real quickly. When the date of my ordination 20 years ago was on September 5th. And I was like a little disappointed because the nuncio and everyone had to coordinate schedules, but it was like no feast. It wasn't a feast day. It was like nothing. I'm like, it's just like, it's not a feast day. Can't we do like the 8th, the birth of our Blessed Mother or something? But it eventually became the feast day of St. Teresa of Calcutta.
Oh, that's a pretty good one.
So that's a good one. So she's my helper. No, I know it was great today walking over here. I passed the schoolyard. The kids are back to school today.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very happy to see them, and maybe our parents are very happy to know that they're here. But just all our parents who are sending your children to our Catholic schools and faith formation programs, just thank you for allowing us to be partners with you in the education and faith formation of your children. It's truly an honor. This day we're recording, Billy, is the feast of St. Bartholomew. It was many believe that it was Philip who said to Bartholomew, "Come and see." He led Bartholomew to Jesus, and then Bartholomew had this deep relationship with him, the Lord, and the Lord chose him to be an apostle. And I often like to think, dear friends, that through our faithful witness each day, by the example of our integrity, our gracious words, our generous deeds, think about it. In all those ways, what you're saying to people who love you, people who know you, or colleagues or whatever, through all those actions, what you're really saying is, come and see. Because that's an inspiration to people to maybe draw closer to the Lord. So never underestimate what you're doing, what you're saying. The witness you're offering is an invitation for people to maybe come closer to the Lord. And let's pray, God, that they say yes to that invitation. Absolutely. And ask the Lord to help all of us this day and always to walk humbly with our God. Thank you for listening to the Walk Humbly podcast. Make sure you check out more episodes on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. You can follow me on Twitter at Bishop Burbidge, where I offer gospel reflections each morning and share photos and updates of what is going on in the Diocese of Arlington. Stay up to date with news, event information, and inspirational content by subscribing to our e-newsletter at arlingtondiocese.org.